Hey folks, welcome once again to another episode of There's Just Something About Kansas City, where we're in casual conversation and positive conversation about this city, its people, its places, its things, because there is just something about Kansas City. I can't tell you how happy I am and how afraid I am to have these two people in at the exact same time. It's almost more afraid than I was with Grunhard and Moss, okay, about something going off the rails.
I'd be way more afraid about Grunny and Billy Bob. I mean, come on.
This is Kansas City's broadcasting power couple, as you recognize both of them from their great long careers, successful careers here in Kansas City. Kris Ketz, KMBC-TV, longtime anchor, and of course, his wife, Dana Wright.
Hello.
Dana and Parks, KMBZ radio for a long time, and former investigative reporter and anchor at KCTV5.
I'm just Mr. Dana Wright.
Oh, yeah, you know what?
Yeah.
I understand how that stuff works, yes. Well, how are you?
Good.
You good? You
Yeah.
both good?
Oh,
okay.
yeah.
Okay, here's the deal. How did this happen?
People ask us all the time, how did you two meet?
I don't know. We don't know.
It's a small fraternity. I asked you on my show the other day, Frank, how did you and I meet? You know this business.
Yeah.
I have no idea.
Yeah.
I think I met you through media things, and I know I met him through media things. It was probably a homicide or a car wreck. I hate to say it. You want it to be some flowery, happy, romantic story.
Yeah, right.
It was probably somebody's worst day because we were both reporting opposite each other for the 10 o'clock news at that time.
Yeah,
Now-
isn't that amazing? You
Yeah.
were competitors at that time.
Yeah, and he
yes.
was a jerk out in the field.
See, she says that. I knew that's where that was going. I don't remember her necessarily treating her any differently than I did the rest of the competition. But I mean, you know, on the street, reporters were all kind of fighting the same battles and facing the same challenges, whether it's at work or on the street or whatever. And she swears up and down that I treated her dismissively. I don't recall, just period. I don't recall that was, I just don't recall.
Which is the definition of dismissively.
Yes. And you are again?
Well,
But you remember, Frank, like
absolutely.
Mike Mahoney
yeah.
and Kris Ketz out in the field were
Brutal.
the brutal 10,000-pound gorilla in the room. And you know, it's
we're
very...
we're teddy bears.
So,
Come on.
so back in the
Stop.
day, no one else could get a word in edgewise, and now it's come full circle because he can't get a word in edgewise.
Well, yeah, we know that, okay? So you decided to marry him to shut him up? Is that what you're trying to
It's like, stop stepping on my questions. This is my crime scene, you ass. And then after that, we got along famously.
Yeah, because it's true, because he is a very, well, and the deal was he probably wasn't dismissive. He's so serious.
Yeah.
He was always, I mean, this is serious business. You come from, you know, your dad was a tremendously popular broadcaster back in the Quad Cities for years and years and years and years, and that's how you learned the business. That's how you learned to do it. And you started at a very young age as well, at 18 on radio.
Yeah.
And then eventually went to Quad Cities for television after that, and eventually came here. But you were always a very serious guy. But not that you weren't, Dana, because you were an investigator. You were jumping out of bushes with microphones. Okay, Channel 5 back in the day.
But in a different way. I think you and I both came about the business in a very different way.
Now you weren't jumping out of bushes.
I jumped out of a couple.
Well,
You ain't going to see me coming, I'll tell you that. I'll get you.
Hey, he already has his arms folded.
Right?
this is
He's already sitting in defensive posture.
This is going to be
All right.
this is going to be a painful hour.
Here
But
we
go
go.
ahead. Yeah, this is what this is going to be.
You know, I'm going to tell you something I don't think you know. I don't even know that you know this. I started out in pre-law. I was going to be a lawyer. God, I wanted to be a lawyer. And then I thought I wanted to be
I
a
think
criminal
there are times she still does.
lawyer.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so we get to do a lot of that fun stuff on our show when we talk about legal issues that I know nothing about but pretend that I do. And the reason I switched from law to journalism is because of great sports broadcast legend Greg Sharp's wife.
Know that?
I don't know that I've even told you this.
Greg Sharp, voice of the Huskers.
Yep.
Yes.
I was home one day and in Topeka flipping around, and I saw Amy Leitz on the news delivering a report for Channel 27. And I thought, well, goddamn, if Amy Leitz can do that, what's she doing on Channel 27? I want to do it. It was this. I went to high school with Amy.
Have you told Amy
She
this?
does know this, and we're friends to this day. And I went back to KU, and I wandered into the J School, and I said, hey, I got this friend in Topeka doing this. Where's my invite? This is what I want to do. I can't believe people get paid to do this. And the guy literally looked across the desk at me. I'm trying to remember if it was the dean at the time. And he said, come on in. And that was it. I had the grades to switch. I switched over. I think I got a minor in criminology or something worthless I, didn't need.
But I think there's a part of you that probably on some level still maybe wishes you had followed a legal path because of your, to this day, she has a keen interest in the law and probably knows more about law than maybe even some lawyers.
I will tell you this. If I had the time and the money, I would go directly to law school, and I'd probably go into media law. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'd be Bernie Rhodes, but I could let me take that back. No one can be Bernie Rhodes.
Yeah.
It would be
God bless
my
him.
aspiration to be the greatest media lawyer in the country, and I think that he is.
Yeah, right. Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah, the deal is, too, it's funny how we get into this situation. I had no intention of being in the media.
Yeah.
I was a football coach when I got out of Villanova, and I had a BS in finance from Villanova. I was going to Wall Street or whatever and decide now coach football like an idiot. I mean, it was great.
Yeah.
It was wonderful. But it was just, and then all of a sudden you get this, somebody gives you this, or you saw Amy Leeds on TV.
Yeah.
You saw your dad every day. You see somebody and you go, I think I'd like to do that. That looks like a great way to stay in sports for me, but not be a coach, not put those hours in, not do that, 17 hours a day looking at film type.
Yeah, I think most of us came about it through kind of a side door, except Kris is one of the exceptions where I think you knew from.
I knew early on.
Oh, my God.
This is what I wanted
forever.
to do.
And the other thing for you is sometimes that drives you away. Dad's doing this. I'm not going to do what Dad does.
Well, that was the case. That was the case with my two younger brothers. I think they saw what Dad did. They saw the toll, the price that he paid in terms of the family events that you miss at night because you're anchoring a 10 o'clock newscast, and I think that probably had something to do with why they followed the path that they did. But this is all I've ever wanted to do, which is a little scary to think about.
You're 40.
Yeah, it's 40 years at KMBC this year for me. And just in the business, 45 and a half.
Yeah.
I was a 18-year-old kid working and I was still a senior in high school when I walked into a 1,000-watt radio station in Moline, Illinois.
Sometimes that's the way you have to do it. And then you graduate from there to TV. And having Dad probably didn't hurt.
No. Did it open doors in the beginning in Moline, Illinois? Damn right it did. Of course it did. I was Jim King's kid. Yeah. Absolutely it did. But and the guy who gave me my first job, who has since passed away, a guy named Mark Minnick, who was one of the best bosses I ever had. I didn't have any experience. I didn't have any formal training. I was on the high school forensics team, and I seemed to be able to read a newscast.
Yeah.
And so
he reads a mean prompter.
So I got a job reading weekend news again at this small radio station. But it was a radio station, and this is an illustration of how times have changed. In Moline, Illinois, a city of about 45,000 and a metropolitan area at the time of about 350,000, they had a 6-person full-time news department. And they had just won a National Headliners Award when I got there. So I learned under some phenomenal people, really.
Who went on to do probably some phenomenal things, yeah.
And so, and I've always given myself credit for this. Whether it was starting at that radio station or walking into KMBC for the first day on the 4th of July in 1983. Those were two moments where I walked in, looked around, and knew immediately, man, I'm in way over my head. I have no business being here. This can only end in this is going to end in flames, okay? But I give myself credit for this. I was smart enough to know at that moment, if I just kept my mouth shut and watched how these much better people worked, I might learn something. When I walked into KMBC on the 4th of July of 83, I'm walking into a newsroom. I'm to my right, the late, great Edward Lewis. To my left, Michael Mahoney. Next to him, Bob Worley. Couple of months later, Bev Chapman, who is, for my money,
bar none.
If there's a better writer in television or in media, show me, because I haven't seen it. Peggy Bright next to her. Again, I knew I wasn't anywhere near these people in terms of ability, talent, whatever.
But don't you think the ones that are the best at what we do, Frank, come in with that mindset? You know, we've worked with the opposite, where I'm here, you're welcome,
Right.
and that doesn't work out very well in this town. I when I started at Channel 5,
You
was
walked into a
terrified. Wendell Anschutz
Big
was
dog
there,
newsroom, yeah.
Ann Peterson, Reed Black. I mean, the list goes on, and I'm this ding-a-ling from Topeka.
You want to talk about somebody who would have been dismissive to you? It would have been Reed Black.
Oh, it was just, oh my gosh. I just remember being just, I can't believe I'm here. Or let me rephrase that. I can't believe they let me in here.
Yeah, right.
I had the same feeling.
I can't believe they've let me in here.
Yeah, it's a little different than walking into J school.
Oh.
Going, I can do
Yeah,
that.
I can do
Yeah.
that. I saw Amy.
And all
I
of
can
a
do
sudden
that.
you walk in and go, oh my God, despite
yeah.
the fact you'd worked in Topeka, for that period of
Yeah.
time
But
to get your feet wet.
The big question for me was, especially at KMBC, how long could I last before I got
before
to a
they
point?
know.
Before they figured it out.
Before I exposed myself.
Before they figured it out, man, he didn't know anything.
Yeah.
And that was a man, that fear back then kept me up at night.
Yeah, well, and it also kept you on your toes.
Yes.
Doing the right thing. And then you
Could I
mentioned-
survive?
Yeah, Larry Moore.
Yeah.
I mean, you're sitting there, and there's Larry Moore and you with Wendell Anschutz
Oh,
and Ann
gosh.
Peterson,
Yep.
who actually, for Ann Peterson, she did walk out of college. She did walk out of J school onto a top 30 TV market.
This is how little I knew. There was a day that Ann Peterson was gone. Dear friend of mine, by the way. Barb Porter, one of my greatest friends to this day, was gone. And I had come up as a former news anchor in Topeka who, again, was very young and knew nothing. And so for whatever reason, everybody was gone. I don't know if the flu had wiped through the newsroom, but they said, you're going to be anchoring the 5, 6, and 10 today with Wendell. This is how little I don't know.
With
with
the
Wendell
legendary,
Anschutz.
the legendary
You
Wendell
know, sitting
Anschutz.
next to, I think it was William
Rest in
Jackson
peace.
at the time, or Leif Lysak was there, Eilander. Just crazy talented people. And this is how little I knew. I didn't know where the studio was. Do you remember, Frank? Our studio was in the basement.
I was in the basement. I remember
I
that.
was there
I've
a
been
while.
there.
Because
Yeah.
at Channel 5, you were out on the
But
streets.
you were still at 4500 Shawnee Mission Parkway, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
And so I didn't know where I was going, but I'll be damned if I was going to tell anybody about it. I'm going to read a mean damn prompter next to Wendell Anschutz. I ain't fucking this up. So I literally am following the producer. I do my makeup upstairs, panicking because I know the studio's somewhere in the basement, but I don't know where it is. So we go down these, ocean nightmare concrete steps, and I'm following Kris Selfridge, who's now in
Yes,
Chicago,
yes,
down the stairs. And he's got the scripts, and I'm following. Well, the producer's booth's on the left.
Mm-hmm.
The studio's back behind these, crazy Prices Right doors on the right. I follow him to the left, and he goes, "What are you doing?" And I go, were you going to hand me the scripts? Or I'm literally trying
You're tap dancing.
tap dancing, and I think he knew she doesn't know where the goddamn studio is. This girl isn't gonna last 12 minutes in this town. There's just something about Kansas City and the door to the studio to Channel 5. So he moves me along and shuffles me off to the right, and then I think I see Katie Horner, and I'm like, okay, now I know where I'm at.
Right. And so then they open the doors. All of a
Yeah.
sudden, the lights are
Yeah,
on.
there's the
And
desk.
there's Wendell
Yeah.
sitting there going, where you been?
Yeah, I was prepping.
But Wendell,
Hold it. Put
Wendell-
my mascara on.
may he rest in peace.
Yeah, God bless
I'm gonna, knowing Wendell as I did, I'm going to assume that, there was not a nicer guy
No.
Oh, God.
in
he's
this
all
business, in this town, than Wendell.
We finished that first newscast, and he turned to me and he said, "Dana, that was good. You're a real pro."
Wow.
World.
And I about fell out of that chair.
I bet you did.
And then I said, "Can you tell me how to get back upstairs from here?"
Well, here's, my first day at KMBC on the 4th of July, 83. So I walk in, and it was even money. I could even find the studio downtown. We were in the old Lyric Theater.
The old Lyric Theater, sure.
11th and Central. Forever. And so I walk in, find the newsroom. It's a holiday, so nobody's there. I meet the assignment manager, a guy named Paul McCarthy, and he said, "Hi, how are you? Welcome. We're going to send you to Topeka, where we need you to find the governor of Kansas." At the time, there was a story about the first lady of Kansas, and at the time it was John Carlin. Apparently his wife, and there was some controversy or squabble about some money that was spent about building a pool at Cedar Crest in Topeka. So we want you to go to Topeka and find the governor and ask him about
Let's go
this.
knock on the door.
On the 4th of July.
On your 4th of July. Sure.
First day.
Nothing to it.
You know, today, if we have somebody new come in, we usually kind of give them a couple of days to kind of figure out where the bathrooms are,
where the studio is.
how to pick up the phone, stuff. You know, just we kind of ease them in. No, this was literally Paul McCarthy said, "Hi, how are you? Listen, you need to head to Topeka." So I, thank goodness, the photographer I was with, one of the best photojournalists on the face of the planet, who still does some work for us now, and then his son works for us full time, Tim Twyman. Thank God I was out with Tim, because at least he knew
where to go.
He knew where to go.
He knew where the governor's mansion was.
He knew where the governor's mansion was. And see, and I knew I knew enough to know that John Carlin was governor, but I wouldn't know John Carlin if he were sitting next to me.
Right.
I had no idea what the guy looked like.
You get by with a little help from your friends in this business.
So you get by with a lot of help from your friends. And so, long story short, we figured out where the governor was. He was at some 4th of July celebration at the Army depot in Topeka. Found him. He was gracious enough to do an interview with us. We actually filed a story at 10 o'clock that night. I don't know how by some miracle, we actually got on the air. And I guess the story was okay and it made sense. Our mutual friend, Mike Bush.
Oh, yeah.
Mike, who was doing sports for us and then went on to a phenomenal career as a news anchor in St. Louis. He's the guy. And I'll never forget, so we're watching the piece air in the newsroom, and Mike Bush, he may not even remember this, turned to me and said, "Man, you're good." And I said, "Oh, my God," you know.
Sure.
So, and you know, one other lesson that I learned that day, I made a serious mistake that probably a lot of reporters make to this day, is I always made it a point to introduce the photographer that I was working with to whoever we were talking to. And I made the mistake of saying, "This is my photographer. And Tim Twyman, on the way back from Topeka in the car, set me straight on that. So I am not yours. And he was absolutely right. I didn't know. Didn't know.
Yeah, sure.
To this day, I only made that mistake once. And thanks to Tim, I've never made that mistake again.
Yeah, right. Because you have to introduce them a different way, yeah. So you were born in Quad Cities. And I found out
I was born in Omaha.
you were born in Omaha. Okay.
Born in Omaha, but grew up in the Quad Cities.
Grew up in Quad Cities. And I found out, looking at Quad Cities.
In Moline, yeah.
Right. It's not, I thought it was 4 cities.
Yeah, it's 5.
No, it's 5.
In what world? It's like the Big 12. In what world does that make sense?
It's what we do. I don't know.
It's the shape of that area is a quadrangle. That's
Well,
why
it's
they call
that.
it the Quad. That's why they call it the Quad
See,
Cities.
I always thought it was
found
just
that out.
the 4 main cities: Davenport, Bettendorf on the Iowa side of the Mississippi River.
Right.
Other side is Moline, Rock Island. East Moline is also part of the Quad Cities now. But anyway, yeah. I mean, even growing up, Quad Cities, Quint Cities, but mostly Quad Cities.
Yeah, and then you were born in Emporia, correct? So was my wife, Sarah. What hospital were you born in?
I believe it was just the only one that's there.
Newman.
Is it
now?
Newman?
Yeah, I think she was born in St. Mary's, which is now a retirement home.
My parents sent me a photo
home
this last week. Yeah. My parents sent me a photo last week. They were driving through Emporia. They took a photo of this old ramshackle, dilapidated house and sent it to me. My father is a very funny guy, and he said, "You were conceived on this front porch." And I have been in therapy since. That's my dad. I go, wow.
Yeah, I can see Craig. I can see Craig doing that.
Thanks, Dad. And he literally said, "Yeah, I really gave it my all that night." I swear to God, Frank, I swear to you.
Sounds like Craig.
That's the text I got while I'm on the air. Thanks, Dad. That's great.
Was there a swing there?
Frame that for my mantle. I don't even want to know.
Was it on the floor of the
right.
front porch? Was it on a swing?
Yeah.
Well,
yeah.
I mean, you
you had to be
Drop
there.
that little nugget on me.
Hey,
So
gave it his all.
I
Gave it his
don't-
all,
I
and
don't-
here she is.
I don't think we were there very long. I think, I was born, my father was in school studying to be a drummer. He's a musician, professional musician by trade. And my mom was in the teacher's college. They get pregnant with me, and they moved back to Topeka, where his father, my late grandfather Norman, was a farmer for years and worked at First National Bank downtown and all this great stuff. And so I don't think we were in Emporia 5 minutes. I mean, I think they were there for a while.
Sure.
They both dropped out of college. He worked as a professional musician until I was about 12 years old.
Oh, really?
I grew up in a bar eating maraschino cherries, listening.
Now I know the problem.
Yep, that's right. And listening
makes
to the
sense now,
greatest
doesn't it?
music. They did covers of, oh my gosh, that's why I love Elton John and the Beatles. And
Yeah.
I grew up listening to great music
In
the
a
home.
smoke-filled room.
In a
those days.
smoke-filled room. You know it.
That is just incredible.
Yeah.
And you have great history. Goes all the way back to the state of Wisconsin with your great
On my father's side,
right?
Yep. Yep. As you said, my father anchored in this business. He was at the ABC station up in Moline.
Named Jim King. I want you to
Jim
explain
King.
that.
Well, and here's the story about. So I'm born in Omaha. My dad was doing sports at the ABC station up in Omaha, which is now a Hearst station. It's ours. And so when he got the job, and he grew up in Chicago, Lincoln Park, okay, and went to the Air Force and met my mom while he was in the service. And so when he got he got that job at KETV up in Omaha, the general manager at the time thought that the last name Ketz, which is I'm German and Scott-Irish and Mexican and Chilean on my mother's side.
Right.
And so the general manager of the television station thought that the name Ketz sounded too ethnic.
Too German.
So he made my dad change it, and he did to King, and he kept that as his air name through till the day he died. And if you went up to the Quad Cities, if you said Jim Ketz, they might not know, but if you said Jim King,
everybody.
okay,
knows.
yeah,
I know, yeah.
okay, gotcha. So they made him change his name, and I was born in Omaha, but we were only there a couple of years, and then the station he signed on with the ABC station in Moline. From day one, and passed away on the 2nd of January, 1999. He was pushing a snowblower on the day of a blizzard. I mean, they had a foot of snow and shopping malls closed and everything shut down. And I'll tell you something. I'll never forget. And this is only something that I think maybe people in the business might appreciate. But so on the day my father died, what did all three local television newscasts lead with up there? It wasn't the blizzard. It wasn't the fact.
Snow.
It wasn't the fact there
No,
was
she
a foot of
did.
snow. It was the fact my dad passed away,
Yeah.
which I think he would have.
Oh, he would have loved that.
I
he'd
think he
loved
would have
that.
thought that was pretty
I
cool.
scooped them all.
Damn right he did.
And the deal is, too, you had that wonderful privilege to anchor with him on Father's Day.
Father's Day, 1998,
At KMBC.
At KMBC, my boss at the time, our very good friend. Brian Bracco, who, for those who don't know, he was the guy who made me a weeknight anchor when I was on no anchor track whatsoever. And to this day, I say to Bracco and we see each other a fair amount, what the hell were you thinking about? I mean,
He knew.
Him and our at the time vice president, general manager. These were two of the best bosses I've ever had: Dino Denovitz and Brian Bracco, bar none. And these guys. When I got to KMBC in '83, you would have been hard pressed to find a television station with a worse image in its community than ours. And it was Dino and Bracco who were the architects
Turned it around.
to at least for my money, one of the great turnarounds in television broadcasting history. I mean, these guys. And so, but Bracco had this idea. And he came to me one day and he said, "Do you think your dad would come down and anchor a Sunday night Father's Day newscast with you?" And I said, "So I don't know. I'll ask." And I did. And of course, my dad jumped on it and came down. And it was the Sunday night 10. And Busby was doing weather. Dave Stewart was doing sports. And one of the great nights ever in our family. And it's funny because people still come up to me and they still remember that night. And then he would pass away the following January. But it was pretty cool.
That is pretty cool.
Yeah.
That's pretty cool. And and for you, you're doing a TV thing. You're a journalist. You're doing a TV thing, and you're Casey, and then you're the investigative reporter and doing all that stuff. When did you make the decision? I want out of this, and I am going to go do something else. And how did that all come about? Because, Dana and Parks afternoons now is just, it's a monster. You created a monster. I mean, you're like #1 in ratings through that, 2 to 6 time slot, which is a really tough time slot. It's drive time. It's all
My
thing.
wife creating a monster. Think
yeah,
about that for a second. Okay.
Well, no.
terrifying.
Dad and Mom, created the monster on that front porch, and then she became who she is today. Yes, go ahead.
It's a crazy story. They asked me 2, 3, 4 times over the course of about 2 years.
Were you still work? You were still
I
working
was still
TV?
working at Channel 5, but television's a grind. The hours are terrible. I had 4 children and had missed a lot of stuff.
Yes.
You know that. I mean,
Sure.
I'm working, getting up at midnight to do mornings, coming home at midnight after doing, I had a baby in a swing about 2 weeks old. I'll never forget it. And one of the assignment editors said, "We need you to go to a standoff in Raytown." And standoff is code for no one is inside. Right. You're going to be standing there until 1 a.m. freezing your ass off, and there's not going to be anyone in there, and then we're all going to go home.
Yeah, right.
And I knew I had this baby at home. And that was about the time I thought, God, I just don't know I can continue doing this because you've got the mom guilt.
Sure you do.
I'm out, I'm out doing this that it really, in the scheme of things, isn't going to matter a hill of beans tomorrow. And then I got this baby at home screaming because I was breastfeeding. I used to pump breast milk in a live van as they were dredging for a fisherman's body in one of our bodies of water around town. I mean, I've got some crazy mom stories back in the day. And let me tell you, ladies, they don't tell you how hard breastfeeding is. They certainly don't tell you that you're going to be waiting for a floater, okay?
Got a floater.
With your photographer, Rob Rhodes,
Yes.
who then,
Right.
and using the plug-in in the van to plug your breast pump in. I mean, I did it, all of that. And then finally one day was like, my God, I just don't know how long I can keep doing this. But the television business for 17 years was very, very good to me. Very, very good to me. And the contacts that I have and made and friends to this day are still in my life that have helped me in the radio transition. But Scott Parks took me out, bought me a drink, and said, "We want you to come do radio." And I said to him, that is the dumbest idea I've ever heard in my entire life. Because back then, I called it, and lovingly, my father's an old angry white guy, I called it Old Angry White Guy Radio. And I said, "Scott, I don't even listen to your show. It's a bunch of guys yelling about, Ronald Reagan or something. I don't
sure.
know.
Screaming about politics.
Shit doesn't mean anything to me. I'm the mom that is literally worried about how what's going on with soccer, and
Sure.
and I'm just in a different phase of my life." And he said, "No. That's why we think this is going to work. We don't want to scream about Ronald Reagan anymore, or whoever it was they were screaming about." And so for 2 years I said no, and then finally one day I don't remember what the breaking point was. I just remember thinking, why not?
Yeah. The hours are way better.
Why not? And one of the things he said was, "You will never have more fun in your life. We can control what we talk about. If you don't want to talk about the child that was shot down the street, we don't have to talk about that. We can talk about what we want to talk about.
Right.
Make it our own." And I do firmly believe there was a moment about a year in. I don't think we knew what we were doing for the first couple of years, quite frankly. I didn't know where the studio was. There was a moment a couple years in where we looked at the board, and the board in front of us is the callers coming in, and the screened calls coming in, and it said Ann, Betsy, Mary, and Scott said, "Oh my God, look at the board." And I said, "What?" And he said, "It's all women." He said, "We never had a woman call in before." And I said, "Yeah,
No wonder.
your show is fucking terrible." I'm sorry. I love you.
Is it okay that she drops these F-bombs?
Oh, hey, the more the merrier.
Okay, fine. All right,
I know,
just check.
Scott,
Just
like,
check.
if it's crazy if you ask women their opinions about stuff that matters to them every single day, and very little of that, by the way, happens in Washington. Like, they'll have opinions about stuff, right?
Oh, yeah.
And men are the same way. And so, we made the conscious decision very early on. When I decided to jump, I said, number one, I voted for Barack Obama twice, and the general manager said, "We know, we don't care." And I said, number two, I don't ever want to talk about politics that does not matter to the listener on this program. I'm not doing it. Don't even ask me about what's going on in Washington. I don't give two shits what's going on in Washington right now, unless we will mention the passing of John McCain. God
Yeah,
rest his
sure.
soul. You will mention that, and then we move on. We don't say, "How do you feel about his political history and the votes that he made?" No one cares. Like, people are just trying to figure out how to afford food and gasoline right now, right?
And rent.
And rent.
And they came by, young kids came by
And my
homes.
God, the people like losing their pets because they lost their homes. I mean, that's the stuff that to me, that matters. How can we help? There's something about Kansas City. That's the name of your podcast. There's just something about Kansas City. What is it that matters here. And once in a blue moon, that will be political. But it is very, very rare because you know what politics does? It pisses people off, and half the people change the channel. And if I know anything about radio, you don't want half the people changing the channel.
Right. And I don't know if you want to talk about this, but you got in a situation where it was pretty scary for you because you ended up with this guy who text you a death threat.
Yeah.
Which you're just going, what? And you guys really weren't even dealing in politics at that time.
No, it's interesting. We've had death threats come in against the president, and if you do that, by the way, CIA
You're
and
going
Secret
to
Service
jail?
will knock on your door. And
The FBI will find you.
They will
Yes.
find. They're
They will.
very good.
They have your phone.
at
They're good
finding
about
you.
that. Yeah.
They have your
They
phone.
have your phone number.
Okay, they
'cause
know
it
exactly where you
comes
are.
in on the text line.
That's right.
So we've had a lot of strange things come in to that number where I don't look at the text line anymore. There is some use in that where people will weigh in, and Scott handles that and reads those. But it's also the worst of the worst because people think they're anonymous and they're not.
Right, exactly.
And so we've had, Kris, what would you say, 4 or 5 threats over the last several years where it got to the point that it was just like, oh my gosh, now we've got to have security here. And one of the last times it happened, I had enough, and we prosecuted that case to the fullest extent of the law. And
That's good.
it was a felony criminal threat. And the topic at the time, I can't even remember, but he was angry over my mispronunciation of a town in Canada.
Yeah. Something crazy.
Regina, Saskatchewan.
Regina, which, by the way,
Okay,
I pronounced Regina, did not understand how funny that was. That's what it was. The topic was a town of Regina. The powers that be thought, let's be cheeky, let's be funny, and we'll change the Convention and Visitors Bureau. They had a whole campaign, come visit our Regina. You know, that was the campaign. I'm not making this up. And I didn't understand why this was controversial. I go, well, what's Regina? I don't understand. And Scott goes, it's pronounced Regina. I go, oh. And the whole campaign was, come on in. It's warm. It's happy. You'll have fun here. And of course, I missed the joke.
Before you leave, you'll be totally satisfied.
Yeah.
And some nutbag is listening to this, and his whole takeaway from this topic is, how dare you mispronounce that town? And so when the threats would come in, and Kris will tell you this, it was never about abortion, which we don't talk about. No. It was never about guns, which I refuse anymore to talk about. And it was never about politics, which I, bar none, will not talk about. It's always about some dumb, crazy stuff. Women in technology was one of them. Kansas City is a great place for STEM and women in technology. And my God, some guy took
offense to
that, and I'm going to come there and blah, 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 you know.
But Kansas City just became one of the 41 cities, ends up with all this money from the government to be a biohub.
Yes.
So KC is a biohub.
So we're talking about happy things.
Yes.
And then somehow, some guy with a screw loose, I'm going to kill Dana. And here's the deal. The sports guys always would walk me to my car before we had security. And God bless all those sports guys. I'm like, it's not your job to... And they would laugh. They would go, it's always Dana. There's just something about Dana. We need a podcast. There's just something about Dana.
Guys, that's not a bad idea.
Because the sports guys would go, what the fuck did you say today? And I go, I don't know.
610 Sports, their studios and BZ studios, they're right next to each
they're
other.
So sweet.
Absolutely.
Carrington and Cody and all those guys.
And what she didn't mention was the threat that we're talking about in particular was made by a guy who was reacting to something at 4 a.m. That's when he sent that text.
And Amy Anderson saw it.
And Amy Anderson on the mornings saw it, but he was clearly listening to the podcast. He wasn't listening to the live
very strong podcast numbers.
Broadcast. Clearly.
I just hoped he had a meter.
Yeah, clearly. But so anyway.
It's been crazy. But that's the 1/2 of 1/2 of 1/2 of 1% of the only thing I can complain about of what has been the greatest job of my lifetime.
Yes.
Because
well, you can tell.
The stuff we get to say is the stuff as a news anchor I always wanted to say that would get me in trouble if I went there. And I'll give you a quick example.
And rightly so.
We were talking about fruitcake one day. Speaking of fruitcakes, actual fruitcake, which if anyone's ever had fruitcake, it sucks. It tastes like shit. And I made a joke on the air at Channel 5 that, some guy said, our family's in the fruitcake business and send everyone a fruitcake. And I go, yeah, if you hate somebody. I made a joke. And the great Dave Helling, one of my best friends to this day, is laughing and I'm laughing. And I get called into the office. And I'm like, what the hell did I do now? And my boss at the time, Tracy Brogdon Miller, who's now your son's boss at Channel 4, said, did you make a joke about fruitcake, Dana?
Poor Tracy. Jeez.
And I'm thinking in the Rolodex of all the stuff I could have done wrong, and the list was deep, I go, fruit, is that what this is about? And she goes, well, someone called in, and their family really enjoys fruitcake. And I swear to God, Frank.
I thought it'd be an advertiser.
She
going,
sends me. No,
we sell fruitcake.
She passes this phone number along to me, and she goes, they're upset, and these are our customers. Would you call them? And I looked at her. I love Tracy. And I thought to myself, are you fucking kidding me? You want me to pick up the phone and call some crackpot?
No, this fruitcake, about their fruitcake.
And it was around that time Scott had called again. You want to come over and do radio? And I go, where the fuck do I sign? And that is an honest to God's true story, because all of those things that I would want to say or make a face about, because everyone's thinking it.
Oh, sure.
Now they say to me, do more of that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Do more of that. Because I really do feel like, Frank, if people are thinking it,
you might as well say it.
You might as well say it.
Sure. Let them know how you feel.
Even if it's uncomfortable, or if it's something funny that's kind of on the margins, and I know where the line is. I'm not going to do anything to lose the license. But if it's funny and I think it matters to people and they're in their car thinking it, I will vomit it all over the airwaves.
Yeah. So, do any of your kids? I know your son is in the business. He's at Channel 4.
Yes, he is.
Are any of the other kids interested in this business at all?
It's interesting. 2 of the 4 are interested in law.
Okay,
because
great.
we would
That's
come
wonderful.
home and have conversations about, we talked about this on the air today, and did you know this? I'm really big into, your rights as a woman. One of my sons is famous for saying, I think I knew my mom was a Democrat because she's always screaming about her uterus. So none of them are into politics, but they're into issues, because I would come home from the radio and say, we talked about this today, what do you think, right? Not a damn one of them wants to go into journalism, although my son has a journalism degree.
Yeah.
He works at Tesla, sells real estate, is my mini-me in every wonderful way and more. He is
laugh too?
He's not quite the laugh that I get from my mother, by the way.
Okay.
But Jack is Dana in almost every single way, but I have never been more thrilled he chose a different path.
Yeah.
Because the business is changing.
I know.
And the kids do think, I will say this, and I think you will agree, because they've grown up with us on television and on, people say stuff to them, that.
Yeah.
I think they thought for the longest time that I just backwards blind and dumb fell into radio, and I only talk for 4 hours a day, and I get paid a lot of money to do it, and it's fun, and, I think for a long time they thought that somehow this just happened. And it did.
Easy.
It did. And a lot of people will say this, I could do that. And maybe, I'm not saying you
did.
could. I did. I could do that.
Exactly what you said.
I could do that when I was 19. And I think a lot of people think that, but you know this, Frank, there's so much about this business that is a lot harder than it looks to do well for a long time. And that's when I look at my husband and I go,
Listen,
40 years in one station, in one market, is almost unheard of. You know that.
Yeah.
Especially today.
yeah, but all that, my mother would tell you, all that means is, well, it appears as if he can keep a job. That's what Gloria
say
says.
that.
No,
Stay
she
out
does
of
say that.
Stay out of my basement.
Stay out of my basement. Yeah,
Yeah,
stay
his
out of
mother
my
would
basement.
say that.
Yeah, exactly.
But
Yeah.
we've been blessed. I mean, it's literally the greatest, dumbest thing I ever did in my life was leave television during a divorce, during I had so much going on in my life. Part of me thinks the squirrel part of my brain just needed to make a decision. Sometimes there's a fork in the road and you just got to make a decision. Yeah. And I just picked up the phone and I said to Scott, okay, I'll do it. Yeah. I had no idea what we were doing. None.
Here's the other thing. Now, you're in this business long enough. You're doing what he's doing. He becomes the anchor he has become, and you've become the celebrity and the person in the business that you've had to have had offers from other places in the country to go do what you did. Why didn't you take those offers?
Because, Frank, there's just something about Kansas City.
I knew it, Ketz. I knew I
You
could
just
lead her
teed
right
it up.
into it.
I'm a golfer. I'm sorry. So, yeah, we both had offers to go other places.
Yes, we
but
all
here's
did,
the
yeah.
deal. When I went to KU, I didn't understand why everyone around me seemed to have connections, okay? They all knew each other. All of the girls in the sororities knew each other. And I come in from Topeka. I don't understand the way the world is working at Kansas, okay? I could have gone anywhere. I had like a 3.9. I just thought, I'm from Topeka. I got into KU. I thought that was great. And it was. I didn't understand the connections and the camaraderie and the friendships. And how do you know to do that? And you know what it was? It was swim and dive. in Kansas City. A lot of those kids grew up playing soccer, which we did not have in Topeka,
Right.
swim, which we did not have in Topeka. They had all of these connections already when they arrived there that I did not have. So I get here, and I so badly wanted to have that for my children. And I thought if I could just create that for them, because you know this about me, it's the most important thing in my, I'll cry when I think about it. The most important thing to me in my entire life are those 4 kids.
Oh, sure.
And I wanted that for them. And they have that. And now they go on and they are having this experience that I could have only dreamt of at their age. I mean, my daughter's been to London, and they have done that on their own. They don't necessarily like saying I'm Dana Wright's kid, although they get asked quite a bit.
Yeah.
They don't, actually. They have a different last name. Part of that is by design. It was a horrible television name. And part of that is because I didn't want them, they didn't choose this career.
Yes,
right? And so they've gone on, I think Kris would say, to have a life I can only dream of. They're all smart kids. They're all self-sufficient. My God, they pay their bills. They work. And they have those connections in this town. I've lived in the same house all 22 years. And all of their best friends are in the neighborhood. Yeah. All of those connections are now here for them. And if they choose to leave this town, that's their choice.
You'll kill them.
Yeah,
if they decide to leave this town.
That's not going to go well for them.
That will not go well.
Oh my God, I'm so close to those babies.
No.
But I want them to go find their own path. I truly do. I would prefer that that's here because we all know how amazing it is to be here.
It is.
My son is almost hit the 2-year mark with a young woman that we absolutely adore. And guess what?
She's from here.
She is in law school and she is from here. And it is my sincere hope that they just plant here till the end of my days.
Sincere hope.
Here's the thing: if they break up, that's not going to go well for her son. Okay.
Yeah,
I'm just saying.
I'm taking Olivia.
She'll be fine.
But,
We'll be fine.
Frank, you know this. All of their friends in college have branched out. They've gone to Austin. They've gone to Phoenix. We love going to Phoenix. I love visiting Phoenix. A couple of them have gone to Colorado. You know how much I love Colorado.
Yeah.
You love Colorado.
I love Colorado.
Guess what? Almost every single one of those kids has come back.
Has come back, yeah. But
And
my
why,
wife Sarah
Kris?
has, one of her daughters was the only one that actually, all my kids are here. All her grandkids are here. But her one daughter was in Vero Beach, Florida. I mean, that's a pretty nice place, right? And she's back. She's here, and now everybody's here.
If
So
I had
it's
one,
crazy.
if I could have one wish, it would be that eventually, as we start closing the books on our career, or somebody comes in and says, "We're going to close the books now on your career," because that's in this business.
That's the way it's gonna
that's usually how it happens, right? If I had one wish, it would be that maybe I go down someday to 4 days a week. We stay here and we get to play a little bit more golf. That's it. But it would be here.
But right now,
We can
about
go visit
for
you
you?
in Colorado. We can go
That's
visit
right.
friends in Phoenix.
Yeah.
we're and I now that I've been at KMBC for 40 years, I do get the question now. Well, how much longer are you going to hang around? And here's what I tell them, and it's true. We're already playing golf when the weather's much nicer, 4 or 5 times a week as it is now.
His handicap's gotten much better.
Well, here's my problem. It's still a hell of a lot of fun to go to work. And not many people at my age, at this stage in their careers, can say that. And I know nobody knows how lucky I am more than me. I still love what I do. They seem to like what I do at Channel 9. I have wonderful bosses. I think Hearst Television, if there's a better company out there, show me, as I'm not sure there is. I have a pretty good gig. I know it. And the thing that, above all, if I were to say, okay, it's time to hang it up, I'm not sure I'd know what to do.
You would drive me up
Well,
goddamn wall is what you would do.
There
You two
is
play
that.
golf together?
We do.
Oh, you do?
We
Okay.
do. Not
Not-
always,
All
but
right,
yes.
okay,
But yeah.
go ahead.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Continue with your thought.
But
Yeah, what would you do?
I don't know what else I'd do.
Exactly right.
And it goes back to when I was a kid trying to figure out what it was I was going to do the rest of my life, not knowing what the future was going to hold. I knew I wanted to do this. And I don't know, and I've often looked back and wondered, had this not worked out, how would it have turned out?
Yeah.
And I don't have an answer for that question.
I will brag on you. You are so humble about your career, but I will say this: you know that there are people out there, Frank, that after 10 years in this business, after the 6 o'clock news, They maybe go have a martini.
They leave.
They go
until
home. They hang
9:30.
out. They float back in at 9:30. Kris Ketz does not leave that building ever. I will say to him, you know, my parents are in town. We're going to go grab dinner. We can come out. No, I'll just catch them when they get home. He does not leave that building.
Right.
And I think it's because the business has given so much to him and so much to his family. He is so serious every day about what he does. He still writes almost everything you hear or rewrites. I would not want to be one of his young producers starting out. That it's so important to him that he continue to do the job well. And I'm not knocking anybody that deserves to go home in between and go grab dinner.
Hopefully you're not having a martini, but
No.
just go from
You know
there.
what I mean?
Okay.
And he's not
I
a
know
drinker, but
exactly.
you know what I'm talking about.
I know exactly
He
what you're
will
saying.
not. He just loves what he does.
Yeah.
And he's the guy that thinks, well, God, if I leave and something happens,
That's exactly right. He's not there.
he's not there.
Yeah, exactly. And I think you learned that from your father.
I did.
I bet your father never
No
left.
question.
He
Yeah,
never
my
left.
dad. My dad wrote his own stuff,
Sure.
and that's where I got it.
Yeah. That's what they do. Okay, here's the deal. You both got to go eventually here. I want to ask you both a couple things, and we will get to golf here in a second.
I'll sit here all day. Whatever
well,
you need, Frank.
yeah.
I only work 4 hours a day. I ain't got nowhere to be.
Jeez.
I love
you
this.
you do have quite a life, okay? Okay, number one
Yeah.
for both of you, and I think I know what your answer is going to be, but the most bizarre or sort of you're covering a story,
Yeah.
and you're just going, I can't believe I'm covering this story. And I think I know what yours is.
Do you want it to be
What is
funny
it?
or do you
Oh,
want
it
it to
can
be
be
serious?
whatever you want it
Because
to
my
be.
God, there's
You-
10 million of them.
You can don't give me 10 million. You can do a fun and a serious if you want.
Okay. Funny would be the proverbial cat up in a tree. There's nothing going on news-wise, and we literally put that on the air with a firefighter going to get the cat. We did that one night at Channel 5. They call that a slow news night.
Yeah, that's a slow news night.
Not sure we led with it, but I've
But it
covered
was close.
I've covered it. Serious would be a devastating explosion. It was a gas explosion. Guy flipped a light switch. It blew the house off the foundation. There was nothing left, and the man was launched about 100 yards into a tree and survived. I get there at midnight. There are curtains in trees 3 blocks away. I have never seen a more powerful gas explosion in my life. Fire trucks are there. The only thing you could make out with this house, Frank, was the remnants of what was the stone fireplace. That's it. Not a car, not a tile, not a lamp, nothing. And we are walking through the rain and the muck and the firefighter hose stuff, and I look over, and I am not a religious person. The large white guy Jesus painting is perfectly untouched, laying on the grass.
Yeah.
And I almost said my photographer, it was Chemo Hood. I looked at our photographer, and I go, oh. And he goes, I feel like we should maybe pick that up. And I go, yeah, I feel like we should maybe pick that up.
Yeah.
It was untouched. It was the only thing in that house that was untouched. Wow. We gave it to a neighbor. The man survived that blast and said he felt a presence.
Yeah,
when
a hand on
when
his
the
shoulder.
thing and that the neighbor got the painting back to him. They were a very religious family. Blast killed his mom and dad. And that was one of those where you stop. I was just going to step over it, and I went, better not do that.
Yeah, right.
Like, look, I'm not an extremely religious person, but I ain't stepping on white Jesus from, the one that 1970s that was in the velvet white Jesus. I
know exactly what
I
you're
ain't stepping on that. Let's pick that up and hand that off to somebody.
I might have to
You touch it.
Yeah, right. I might have to kneel down right here just for a
Yeah.
second.
I mean, I have
Maybe
chills.
put my hand
I
on
have
it.
chills thinking about it. I
know.
still to this day cannot wrap my head around that story because so nothing was left, including his mom and dad. I mean,
Yeah, I
just
know.
killed right then and there.
Wow.
Yeah.
Ketz, I think I know what it is for you covering a story.
Are you talking about the tornado?
Yes, absolutely. I was glued.
Best story ever.
It was the best
Worst
story
best story ever.
Worst
I'm so
best-
sorry.
It's the
Well-
worst best story.
May 4th, 2003, we were living in the newer part of Carriage Hill Estates up in Kansas City North. And an F4 tornado took my house and almost my family. And it changed the fact that we all walked away from an F4. I'll go to my grave wondering, how the hell did that happen?
Yeah.
Okay, that's number one. But number two, from a professional perspective, it really changed for me how I look at stories, and especially tornadoes. You know, the one thing that I wish, and just real quick, you know, that was one of those stories where, you know, I had been in the business a while. I'd covered a bunch of tornadoes. I was stupid enough and arrogant enough to think, well, I know what how these scenes are, and
I've seen it.
Been there, done that.
Yes.
Okay,
Right.
until it happens to you, and I will tell you that I didn't have a clue of what to do, what that next step would be,
Right.
and I wish someone would have told me that night that somehow, some way, it's going to be okay. Okay, it's not going to be tomorrow. It's not going to be next week. It's not going to be for a while, but eventually it's going to be okay. And every tornado that I have found myself in the middle of covering since May 4th, 2003, whether it was Joplin, I was there that night, Jefferson City a few years ago, there was another tornado north of the river that did some significant damage. I've always made it a point, the people who were nice enough and gracious enough to share their stories with me, I've always made it a point to take them aside and put my arm around them and say, it's going to be okay. It's not going to be anytime soon.
It's just surreal. I mean, he calls the 1-800 number or whatever and says, we've just had a tornado. And the woman says to him, hand to God, she says, what's your policy number?
I called the insurance company. You know, once
I don't have a house.
Once I saw what little was left, I called our insurance agent at the time, and I knew he had other clients in the neighborhood, thinking that, well, Carlos is probably in his office. Well, he wasn't in the office, but the 1-800 number for the company was on the voicemail message, and so I called the 1-800 number, and guy picks up the phone, takes the call, and there was this sort of weird, awkward moment where I didn't even know what to say. I just sort of blurted out, "We just had a tornado."
And the pork chops that they were marinating.
This was a birthday party at the time for me and my
For
then
that dinner,
father-in-law.
Remained. Everything around that house was gone. The pork chops are still sitting there.
I had this huge platter of pork chops that were about to go on the grill, and then the tornado hits, and so the platter of pork chops, one of the few things that remained on the counter through an F4 tornado. And at the time, the Fujita scale,
God, it's so weird.
Wind between 205 and 250
Yes.
miles an hour. This is a big dog tornado, but the pork chops remained. But anyway, the 1-800 number story. So I just blurted out, "We've just had a tornado," and the guy says, "Oh my God, is everybody okay?" And I said, "Yeah, we're all here." And then there was a pause. He said, "What's your policy number?" I have no idea. My policy is
It's with the house.
it's with the house.
But I can offer you a raw pork chop.
Yeah.
Because that's the only damn thing left here.
You know, and that's one of the things that I tell people. You want to have that conversation with your insurance agent before something like this happens, because that was a very sleepless night for me. I knew I had a policy. I knew I had coverage. I had no idea what was in it.
Yeah,
I had no idea. For all I knew, we were going to be sleeping in a tent as a family for the next year.
Yeah.
And but you want to have that conversation about okay, if God forbid it happens, what's the process? What can I expect? How do I take those next steps?
We would just pick up the phone and call Frank and Sarah. And
Well,
be like,
yeah, exactly.
We're coming over.
We're coming over. Yeah.
Right.
So
We got
anyway.
room. Come on over.
Yeah.
Come on
but
down.
that story it really changed me in more ways than I could ever realize. Certainly at the moment.
All the kids take it seriously now.
Yeah,
I'll
you know,
bet
my
they
kids,
do.
my
They hear
kids,
those sirens go off?
Yep.
Jonathan and Jason. My youngest wasn't born at the time, but Jonathan and Jason will never take severe weather for granted again.
Right, exactly.
And they know exactly what to do and when to do it. And so that's a lesson. The value of that lesson, I can't put a price on that.
Yeah.
Okay, golf. How
Yes.
tired are you? How tired are you of hearing about her holes in one?
Her 3 holes in one.
Her
My
three-
wife's
not one, not
two.
two. She has three.
Yeah.
On the same hole.
Well, her father has 4.
Oh, Dad has
Craig
4.
has
so you
4.
still haven't caught him yet. Oh,
we were
good.
tied. You've got to meet my dad. In fact, we're going to make that happen this week because he's in town. We were tied for a long time.
Yes.
And then last year he got his 4th. And this is my dad. He has some guy tape him pulling the ball out of the cup. And my dad picks up the ball in the left hand, flips me off with the right hand, and says, "Come and get it. I just got number 4." That's my father.
I just got my first hole-in-one on Easter Sunday.
Oh, you did?
Yes,
I didn't know that.
So excited.
Why didn't I see that all over social
well,
media? What the heck was that? Every minute of the day, repost. Dude, I did it again. Here's the ball. Callaway, please bring me 5 dozen
right.
balls.
And thank goodness I hit a really good shot. And because I always thought if I ever got lucky enough to get a hole in one, it would be some worm burner, some weird carom off a tree. It would be some
squirrel
freak.
would carry it over.
Squirrel would carry it over.
In,
some sort of freak event. But I hit a really good shot, and so I hit a really good shot, and I saw it bounce. It was a back flag that day. It bounced in the front of the green, and so at that point I'm thinking I'm putting. Okay, I'm done. Bent down to pick up the tee. And the 3 people that I was playing with, Dana was with her dad down in Mississippi playing golf. Naturally. And so I bent down to pick up the tee. Ron Weldon and Ron Popek said, I think it's in. And I said, no, forget it.
Yeah.
And there was another very good mutual friend, Jake Fuhrer, happened to be walking down. He lives along that hole. He was walking down to join his mom, and they were at a party, which happened to be in back of the green. And so they all yell at Jake, check the cup. And so Jake walks up to and the first thing he does is he looks in back of the green.
Yeah.
Which is smart.
Because
it's always where it is.
Which is always where it is.
Yeah.
And then he didn't say anything, turned around, and we're heading up to the green, turns around, looks in the cup, throws his arms up, and at that point I blacked out.
Yep. This is the difference in one short paragraph between Kris Ketz and Dana Wright. Ketz bends down to pick up the tee because he thinks he's putting. I hold the pose, wait for it to drop, and if it doesn't, I'm pissed off. You will never catch me bending down on the bounce in case it dunks, picking up the tee. I just assume it's going in, Frank. He missed his own hole-in-one because he's picking up his tee.
She's coming up. She walks up
like the pros.
You know what? She walks up. She'll.
Why not leave the tee? They make more.
She'll hit a shot.
What'd you get it for? Wedding present?
Right?
She'll hit it. Now she hits a tee shot on a par 3, and the first thing she says is, "Go in your hole.
Go in your home.
Go in your home.
Go in your home.
Go in your home." Now she expects. She's had 3 aces. She expects that every time she walks up to a par 3, she's going to get a hole.
Always on the same hole, though?
All 3 were on hole 7 at our home course, varying distances. And
they were all front flags, though.
One was front, one was 2 were front, one was middle.
Yeah.
Listen to him trying to knock down my hole. That was a front flag.
No.
How far was it?
Like 123 was one of them, 119 and 128, 9-iron.
All of them?
I got new irons, so the first one was an 8-iron, and then I got new irons. Now it's a 9.
Oh, so you hit them further now. We'll have to get out there and play.
Oh, I can't wait.
Handicap versus handicap.
Yeah, I can't wait. I can't wait.
You're probably single. Are you single digit handicap?
I'm at 10 or 11. And
your
if
gin numbers?
Yeah.
Right
Okay, yeah. And if I get, I've never been able to crack 9. But if I do, I don't feel like, it's like my weight. I don't know that I can maintain that weight. Does that make sense?
It makes sense.
But we would be remiss if we did not. Kris and I get along very, very well.
Yeah, here. Oh, there you go.
I'm a 19.
Okay.
We very, if ever, rarely fight or have an argument. And we're playing out at Shadow Glen, except a couple weeks ago.
Oh, yeah. This didn't
We're
go well.
at Shadow Glen. On hole number 1, I love that course, Shadow. I'm out there doing a practice round before their member guest. And I'm so excited. I beg them, can I bring my husband? And we'll pay for his round.
You didn't have to.
Whatever.
You're not going to pay for his round.
We're out there. And it's hole
this didn't
1,
go well.
and he takes a notoriously long setup time. And as you can imagine, Dana just gets up and whacks it. Let's go. So I'm waiting up toward the green, waiting for him to chip up, and he pulls up out of what I think is a wedge, and that thing comes flying toward Dana like a bullet.
I shanked a 7-iron out of some deep rough.
Okay.
Who hits a 7-iron from 67 yards?
Were you standing in front of him?
Yes.
I
she
was.
should not
Your
have been
fault,
there.
not
Forward
her, not his.
of the line. I was.
Fault. Not
First
his.
thing my dad said, well, were you standing in front of him?
That's right.
Okay, I was ahead of the lateral line, yes. But
Okay.
all the way to the right, the flag was on the left. I'm like, just hit it. He takes like 5 practice swings. Hit the ball. Oh, he hits the ball. About takes me out on hole 1.
It came in low and hard.
Oh,
Hit her
my
in
gosh,
the
like a
shin.
bullet.
And there was a moment where I thought, oh my God, we're talking about a broken or
Yeah.
a fracture or something.
Or I'm cashing in that life insurance.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's what he thought.
Damn, I hit her too low.
And so and I'll never forget that that moment where you've hit a bad shot, you see the line of the ball, it's flight, you know where it's going to go, it's about to happen.
There was no time.
It happens, and so the first thing I thought there'd be a scream, I thought there'd be some sort of cuss word, I thought something. No, she kind of gritted her teeth, turned away from me, and started walking away.
And let the record reflect, I parred that goddamn hole.
Yes, she did. But so the rest of that round, I'm freaking out because now you're playing.
Still got it. Yeah,
Now you're playing the what if scenarios. If that ball had been higher, and that was not a good day for me.
No,
It's funny that we laugh
especially
about
when she
this.
turns and walks away from
Yeah. No, there
The
was
whole time I'm telling everyone he pulls up out of a wedge, and it was a significant injury. I thought I had a blood clot.
It was pretty.
The whole
You had
time,
some contusion
everyone
in there,
keeps saying to me, "How did he do that with a wedge?"
No, it wasn't a wedge.
So we're playing. We're at dinner one night.
She
with
thought
a
it was a
gun,
wedge.
and
It
I'm
wasn't a
telling
wedge.
the story, and I go, "How that happens with a wedge?" And finally, he fesses up and he goes, "It wasn't a wedge. It was a 7-iron." And somehow that makes me feel better. But I'm also like, "Who hits a 7-iron?
No.
67 yards
No,
out."
I wasn't.
It was in the weeds.
We weren't 67 out. I was more like 130 out.
Yeah,
okay, I wasn't 67.
I shot it. I went back a week later. It was 67 yards.
It was not. I was like 130 out. I'm just trying to get it back on Main Street. Okay, I'm not looking to get
Absolutely.
on the green.
You found Main
back
Street.
on
I'm just
the-
and then
Get back on the fairway and let's go. Let's go play. So, yeah, doggone. I can't thank you. We didn't even get to the prices right. I know you want a
God.
car, and I saw the after party, and you couldn't tell anybody, and you're
It's been a
She
crazy
wouldn't even
line,
tell
hasn't
me.
it?
She wouldn't even tell
for
me.
you, that may have been your best moment in life, not
Yeah.
being able to tell something you weren't
Oh, I
supposed
was
to tell.
dying to tell people.
But you were.
It's
I had
just
to
that-
sign something that I said, "You sure I can't tell anybody? Not one person?"
No, not
And
even your husband.
the tax consequences were something we had to deal with later. But
Yeah, I know. I've heard about that when you win
Yeah.
the
If you go on a
the
game
big-
show,
You
let me
want
tell
cash.
You want cash.
You
You
want
want to win
cash.
Plinko.
Yeah, it's a $25,000 car or $10,000 cash. Take the cash.
I will tell you this. Scott Parks and Kris Ketz said to me, "Why are you going on The Price is Right? That's the dumbest thing I've ever." Scott goes, "They only pick people out of big groups." And I go, "Not only," this is like my hole in one. I called the shot like Babe Ruth. I go, "Not only am I going to go on The Price is Right, I'm going to win the whole goddamn thing." And then when I did, my God, I was just dying to tell somebody.
and just going back to answer your question about other jobs and stuff.
Yeah.
Simple answer. Have I had offers? Yes. I never, when the offers came, I just never thought that they were better situations than what I had here.
Yeah.
And that's not just work, that's life, family.
Yeah, it's everything.
Everything.
Yeah, right.
I just never thought that the grass was necessarily greener on the other side.
Because there's just something about Kansas City, dear.
There you go.
I love you, Frankel.
I'm going to leave it right there. I love you. Thanks.
Back at you.